This weekend at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump appeared shockingly sick and visibly weak. Just look at him. Zoom in right there. That's him at breakfast, slumped over, needing a name placard in front of his own plate so he remembers who he is. It literally says President Donald J. Trump at the table. Look again. He looks worse than we've ever seen him. And while he looks like that, here's what he posts in the morning. Winning is always nice, paired with a photo of himself putting on a golf course. Winning is always nice, while Americans are suffering. While families are living paycheck to paycheck. While 20 million people are losing health care. While rent becomes impossible, he's out golfing and bragging about winning. That's the contrast. That's the reality. And it's time to look at it without blinking. And before we go further, tell me what you think. Drop a comment, hit like, and let me know if this looks normal to you, because Americans deserve the truth. In Washington, Donald Trump posted yet another photo, this time with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, taken roughly 2 weeks earlier. He wrote, "Great being with the highly respected future king of Saudi Arabia." And here is the part most people overlook. This was not just a friendly post. It reopened a long trail of questions that have followed this relationship for years. When journalists once pressed him about allegations involving the killing of a reporter and long-standing disputes tied to Saudi nationals connected to the September 11th hijackers, Donald Trump did not address the issues.
That's why tonight I'm pleased to announce that we're taking our military cooperation to even greater heights by formally designating Saudi Arabia as a major non-NATO ally, which is something that is...
According to public transcripts, he scolded the reporter instead, saying, "How dare you treat my guest like that?" That moment revealed a pattern, personal loyalty taking priority over difficult national security questions. Then came the deals. According to government records, his administration approved major transfers to the Saudis. F-35 aircraft, nuclear-related technology.
Are you planning to sell F-35s to Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
And also, are you looking at doing a similar security agreement like you did with her?
Yeah, no, I am planning on doing that, yeah.
You're gonna
They
sell
want to
the
buy,
F-35s?
they've been a great ally.
And advanced semiconductor know-how often described as Blackwell-level AI chip capability. These are documented facts. And when Americans ask what the United States received in return, the public record shows something different. Donald Trump later pursuing business ventures with Saudi partners. At the same time, he amplified another message yesterday, claiming that because he invoked favored nation status, drug prices are dropping by 500%, 600%, 700%. But a price cannot fall 700% unless pharmaceutical companies start paying Americans $700 for a $1 drug. That is mathematically impossible. And federal data show the opposite trend, rising costs, not falling ones. So while Washington trades photo ops and exaggerated claims, ordinary households face higher premiums, higher grocery bills, and no relief in sight. And the deeper you look, the clearer the pattern becomes. The rhetoric grows larger while the gap between speech and reality grows wider. The real question now is simple. How long can this disconnect hold before Americans demand answers grounded not in slogans, but in the truth they live every day? In Washington, something else was unfolding, something that most people would scroll past without realizing what it signals. The Department of Labor under Donald Trump posted an image that looked less like a federal message and more like propaganda borrowed from a darker chapter of history. The graphic used Gothic-style lettering spelling out, "Americanism will prevail," paired with an odd composite photo of Abraham Lincoln and the Lincoln Memorial. And then there were 11 stars. 11, the number often associated with the old Confederacy. Officials offered no explanation. Some may call it coincidence. But when you look closer, the pattern is hard to ignore, and it raises a question about what kind of symbolism federal agencies are choosing to amplify. While Washington sends out images like that, the situation on the ground for working families tells another story. Every major indicator is flashing red. Credit card delinquencies are climbing. Student loan defaults are rising. Jobless numbers are worsening. Consumer confidence is hitting the lowest readings in recent memory. And foreclosure rates in the United States have surged by 32% year over year. 32% more families are losing their homes. It is difficult not to ask why, or whether a labor market quietly weakening for months is finally showing its cracks. So it is no surprise that this morning brought more polling showing Donald Trump's approval rating hitting yet another new low. Each day seems to reveal a deeper drop as the weight of his own decisions bears down on the system he oversees. And rather than looking at political spin, economists have turned to the data. One of them, University of Michigan professor Justin Wolfers, pointed out a detail many have overlooked. According to him, and this comes directly from employment data, if you examine job growth from January through September across the past 15 years, this year ranks near the bottom. Only during the pandemic were the numbers worse. That is not an opinion. It is a statistical comparison across more than a decade. In a recent clip, Professor Wolfers explained it plainly. Job growth for this year's first 9 months is among the weakest in 15 years. And that weakness is showing up elsewhere. The unemployment rate has reached a 4-year high. It has climbed 1/10 of a point here, 1/10 of a point there, slowly enough to avoid headlines, but steadily enough to matter. All told, the rise is roughly 0.5 percentage point. For families watching their budgets, 0.5 point is not a rounding error. It is a signal. This is the part most people overlook. While Washington projects slogans and stylized imagery, the underlying labor market is sending warnings that cannot be brushed aside. And it raises a larger question, not just who is in charge, but whether the system itself is drifting toward conditions we have seen before, conditions that ordinary Americans feel long before Washington is willing to admit them. Across the country, that level of strain is not abstract. Millions of people are struggling. Work has always been more than a paycheck. It is a social anchor, an economic pillar, and for many Americans, the place where dignity and self-worth are shaped. When the labor market weakens, it is not just numbers on a chart. It is a slow tightening on families, on identity, on stability. And the truth is, we have not talked about that enough. From University of Michigan economist Justin Wolfers, the conversation moved to someone sitting at the top of the financial world, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. He was asked why the bank refused to take part in funding Donald Trump's Golden Ballroom project after the demolition of the East Wing. And his answer revealed something most people miss on the first pass. As Dimon put it, more and more leaders in corporate America are quietly preparing for a world without Trump pretty soon. That was his phrase, a world without Trump. And embedded in that simple line is a deeper question about the future. How a new Department of Justice might evaluate transactions that could be interpreted as quid pro quo attempts to buy access or favor. Then came the Fuller exchange. The interviewer noted that many companies, Amazon, Coinbase, Google, Comcast, and others, had already offered donations for the massive Washington project. JP Morgan Chase was not on that list. Why? Dimon explained that because the bank holds government contracts in the United States and around the world, every decision must be measured against perception, legality, and the judgment of the next DOJ. His words were careful, deliberate, almost cautious. Anything that appears to buy favors carries risk, real risk, and the bank's internal policies forbid contributions that could be seen that way. He noted that JP Morgan has supported normal inaugurations, long-standing civic events companies have participated in for decades. But special projects tied directly to a sitting president's private interests? That is another category entirely. So the bank was keeping its distance, aware that a shift in federal leadership could bring scrutiny none of them want. And that final line from Dimon lingered, the concern of buying favors. He said it plainly, and when a chief executive at that level chooses those words, it tells us something important about how corporate America sees the moment and what they believe may be coming next. One more point Jamie Dimon made, and you heard it in his tone, was that JP Morgan operates in many countries, not just here at home. And as America's global position weakens relative to rising alliances abroad, executives like Dimon are forced to think differently. They have to consider not only the White House, but also the leaders of nations forming new partnerships while the United States appears increasingly unstable. That is the part most people miss. When a country's influence slips, its private sector leaders begin recalculating their long-term relationships. At the same time, another development unfolded in Washington, this one cutting across party lines. Members of the House Armed Services Committee issued a rare bipartisan statement addressing the Trump administration's military operations in the Caribbean. Chairman Mike Rogers, a Republican from Alabama, and Democratic Ranking Member Adam Smith both emphasized that the committee is committed to rigorous oversight. Their statement directly referenced reports of alleged follow-on double-tap strikes on boats suspected of narcotics trafficking in the Southcom region. They made clear that they are taking bipartisan steps to gather a full account of what happened. Soon after, the Senate Armed Services Committee released its own bipartisan message. Chair Roger Wicker and Democratic Ranking Member Jack Reed acknowledged the same reports, along with the Pentagon's initial response. They confirmed that formal inquiries have already been sent to the Department of Defense and that the committee will conduct vigorous oversight to determine the facts. These are not opinions. These are official statements from both chambers signaling that Congress is not willing to look the other way. And then came another layer, a striking one. Former senior JAG officials, some of the top military lawyers in the Judge Advocate General Corps, released a public statement. Their position was unequivocal. The alleged follow-on strikes, the so-called double-tap actions, and the reported give no quarter directive attributed to Hexeth and anyone in that chain of command constituted war crimes under established military law. Their view was that individuals involved at every stage should be prosecuted accordingly. This is where the two storylines converge. Corporate leaders recalibrating their risk in a shifting global landscape, and bipartisan lawmakers confronting allegations of unlawful military conduct. They point to the same underlying truth. When institutions sense instability, they begin taking steps to protect themselves. And that raises the larger question we will have to face next. What does it mean for the country when both the private sector and Congress are preparing for scenarios that the public has not yet fully reckoned with? While all of this is unfolding, another thread out of Washington keeps tightening. Donald Trump continues issuing threats toward Venezuela, framing it in language that echoes the way Vladimir Putin spoke about Ukraine, calling it denazification. Trump now claims that Venezuela is a drug trafficking nation, that a cartel is running the country, and that Nicolas Maduro is its leader. From that, he argues, fentanyl is pouring into the United States. Now, let's separate fact from fiction. It is true, and not disputed, that Maduro is a dictator, an authoritarian, and an illegitimate head of state. Those are established facts. But it is also true that fentanyl is not coming from Venezuela. The lethal drugs hitting American communities are largely produced in or routed through Mexico or smuggled across the Pacific. Not from Venezuela, not from Colombia. Those are the facts on the table, regardless of political rhetoric. So when Donald Trump paints Venezuela as the source of America's fentanyl crisis, what is he trying to accomplish? The broader context is that U.S. oil companies have long eyed Venezuela's enormous reserves, among the largest in the world. For years, they have pushed for access. MAGA Republicans have said as much openly. And Trump's claims about drug cartels begin to look like a pretext for something else entirely. Here is my position, stated clearly. I do not support Maduro's rule. But I also do not support the United States marching into another conflict. Not when there are tens of millions of Americans facing crises right here at home. There are between 20 and 30 million Americans on the brink of losing health care. There are families working full days and still unable to afford a home or even stable rent. There are young people looking at the future and seeing nothing but shrinking opportunities. Prices are climbing. Stability is slipping. That is where attention should be, on lowering costs, strengthening the middle class, and restoring hope for a generation that feels boxed in on all sides. Call it naive if you want. That is where I believe the national focus belongs. But Donald Trump's focus is somewhere else entirely. He is sending out messages to supporters, emails written with the urgency of a man whose political operation depends on constant fundraising. I get these messages so you don't have to. They all follow the same script. Ben, I need your help. Then the plea intensifies. Last night's message read, Ben, I hate asking my supporters for help, but today is one of those days where I have no other option. My end-of-month deadline is less than 24 hours away, and I need your help to reach my presidential fundraising goal. Will you make a personal sacrifice to help me? And while those emails go out by the thousands, the country is left to wonder. At a moment when Americans are looking for stability, affordability, and a future their children can believe in, why is the focus always somewhere else? Anywhere else, except on the struggles unfolding at home? And while all of that is happening, Donald Trump continues sending out messages that sound more desperate by the day. He is now begging his supporters to make what he calls a personal sacrifice to help him reach a fundraising goal. A fundraising goal for what exactly? What office? What purpose? That is the first question. The second question is even more obvious. Where is all this money going? This is a man who has made, by his own boasts, billions of dollars. He has leveraged the Oval Office into business partnerships with the Saudis, pushed crypto ventures like World Liberty Financial, slapped his name on vodka, on properties, on everything possible. And now he turns around and asks ordinary Americans, many of whom are struggling, to sacrifice for him. That alone tells a story most people overlook. Yesterday, he sent out 2 emails. The first was the plea. Please make a personal sacrifice for me. The second carried a subject line that simply said, would you accept? When you open it, you see Donald Trump holding $100 bills. The message claims, this is the only tariff rebate email authorized by President Trump. I'm sorry if you fell for the other scams, but I'm grateful to have found you. Would you accept a tariff rebate check signed by Trump? Yes or no? And of course, when you click the button, you discover what it really is. A payment page demanding $3,000 to stand with Trump, or $1,000, or $500. The rebate goes one way, from the supporter to Trump. He does not pay you. You pay him. This follows the same script we have seen before. Promises of $5,000 Doge dividends that never materialized, claims of tariff dividend checks that never existed, pledges of $2,000 healthcare payments that evaporated as soon as the headline was printed. The pattern repeats, a promise up front, and the moment you click, money flows upward, never downward. And in the shadow of that pattern, another story has been circulating. Over the past several days, House Republicans and GOP-affiliated accounts have been posting photos of Donald Trump with American troops, declaring that House Republicans are praying for our men and women who sacrifice their holidays to be with their families. The problem is simple. The photo is from November of the year 2019. Yet they are presenting it as though it were taken on November 27th of the year 2025. That is not an oversight. It is a deliberate reframing meant to evoke emotions untethered from the facts. Meanwhile, the day-to-day cruelty of this administration continues to fall under the radar. One example, the announcement that the nursing profession, a backbone of American healthcare and a lifeline for countless families, would no longer be officially recognized as a profession. It is a small line in a policy document, but it reflects something larger. When a government begins stripping dignity from the people who hold the country together, it reveals how distant Washington has become from the real work and real worth of everyday Americans. And when you step back, the pattern comes into focus. From fundraising schemes, to recycled images, to decisions that diminish essential workers, these are not isolated actions. They are signals from a system that has lost its grounding. And the question we are left with is whether the country will confront that reality before the gap between truth and power becomes too wide to bridge. Amid everything else unfolding in Washington, another decision revealed the deeper character of this administration. The Trump team announced that nursing would no longer be treated as a professional degree, meaning the Department of Education will classify it differently. For a nation held together by nurses, people who walk into danger so others can walk out. The message felt dismissive and unnecessarily harsh. It is a shift that says more about priorities than policy. That same tone appeared again when the administration chose to stop commemorating World AIDS Day. State Department employees were warned not to use government resources or public channels to acknowledge it. Longtime activist Peter Staley called the move petty and hostile, and it is hard not to see why. Honoring a global health day is not about politics. It is about memory, dignity, and the lessons that saved millions of lives. Taken together, these decisions form a pattern. Symbolic acts of unity, recognizing nurses, acknowledging public health milestones, are quietly discarded. And when a government dismisses the people who care for us and the history that taught us hard-won truths, it raises a larger question about what is being elevated instead. As the political noise grew louder, the closing message from this channel spoke to something steadier. They thanked their audience, the community that carried them through a difficult year, won them a Webby Award for Podcast of the Year, and helped keep pro-democracy voices active. The message was clear. the work continues. Something larger is being built for the year 2026, and it depends on engaged, informed citizens. To the viewers, the so-called Midas Mighty, the gratitude was simple and sincere. In a moment when national values feel contested, community remains one of the few anchors still holding.